Most people picture humility as someone small, someone who thinks little of themselves, shrinks in the corner, deflects every compliment, and pretends they have no value at all. But when you watch what Jesus actually did on the last night of his life, true humility looks nothing like that at all. True humility was never about low self-worth or putting yourself down. It's about a secure identity so settled that you no longer need to defend, promote, or perform it in front of anyone. These are 5 specific things you must stop doing. From grabbing the best seat before it's given to you, to performing humility for an audience, to refusing tasks that feel beneath your status. Warning, stop number 5 might be a counterfeit version of humility you've been carrying for years without realizing it. Let's look at the 5 things you must stop doing to walk in true, transformative humility. Most people picture humility as someone small, someone who thinks little of themselves, someone who shrinks in the corner of the room, deflects every compliment, refuses to acknowledge anything good about their own life. And then you watch what Jesus actually does the night before his crucifixion, and it looks nothing like that at all. He kneels down, wraps a towel around his waist, and washes his disciples' feet. Fully knowing, John tells us specifically, that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God. Full knowledge of exactly who he was, and he still knelt. This is not about putting yourself down. This is not about pretending you have no gifts, no achievements, nothing worth mentioning. This is not the same thing as low self-worth. This is 5 specific things you have to stop doing before true humility becomes possible, straight from Jesus' own words and his own actions on the last night of his life. Let's start with the first one, because Jesus catches people doing it in real time at an actual dinner party. He's watching guests arrive at a wedding feast and notices how they choose their seats, instinctively moving toward the places of highest honor, closest to the host. And he tells them a story. When you're invited to a wedding feast, don't sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him, and the host comes and says to you, "Give this man your place," and you begin with shame to take the lowest place. Instead, he says, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, go up higher." Then you will have glory in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. And here's the line underneath the whole story. Whoever exalts himself will be abased, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. This is stop 1. Stop grabbing the best seat, the credit, the spotlight before anyone's actually handed it to you. Self-promotion isn't confidence. It's a scramble for a seat that was never yours to claim in the first place. Stop 2 shows up in a much more uncomfortable scene because it isn't limited to obviously arrogant people. It's hiding inside the disciples themselves, James and John, or in Matthew's version, their own mother, come to Jesus with a direct request. Grant that we may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left, in your glory. And when the other 10 disciples hear about it, Mark tells you exactly what happens. They began to be greatly displeased with James and John. Notice that. Not greatly convicted, displeased, indignant, which means the other 10 weren't reacting with humility either. They were angry that James and John got there first with the same comparison instinct they all secretly shared. This is the same trap the Pharisee fell into, praying his resume prayer in the temple. God, I thank you that I am not like other men, measuring himself not against a standard, but against the person standing nearest to him. This is stop 2. Stop ranking yourself against the people around you, whether it shows up as I deserve the highest seat or as quiet resentment that someone else asked for it first. Both are the exact same instinct wearing different clothes. Before we go further, here's where we are. 2 things down, grabbing the best seat and ranking yourself against others. 3 more to go, and the next one is about performing humility, not actually having it. Stop 3, performing humility for an audience. Jesus says this directly. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them. But when you do a charitable deed, Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret. Here's what's easy to miss about this warning. It's not just about avoiding obvious bragging. It's about a much subtler version, the humble-sounding comment that's actually engineered to be noticed, the public self-deprecation that's really fishing for reassurance, the quiet mention of a sacrifice, worded just carefully enough to make sure someone catches it. Jesus' standard is almost impossibly high. Don't even let your own left hand know, meaning true humility doesn't need an audience at all, not even an audience of one, checking to see if anyone noticed. This is stop 3. Stop performing humility where it can be seen and credited. If it needs witnesses to feel complete, it was never actually humility. It was a performance wearing humility's clothing. Stop 4 is the one Jesus doesn't just teach, he acts it out, physically, in front of the exact people who would go on to tell this story for the rest of their lives. In that world, foot washing was a task reserved for the lowest household servant, necessary, unglamorous, dealing with dust and dirt from open roads. Not something a teacher did, certainly not something the Messiah was expected to do with his own hands. And Jesus rises from supper, lays aside his garments, takes a towel, and girds himself. Then he pours water into a basin and begins to wash the disciples' feet. Peter's reaction says everything about how unthinkable this was. "Lord, are you washing my feet? You shall never wash my feet." The status reversal was so uncomfortable to him that he tried to refuse it outright. And Jesus' response cut straight to the point. "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." After he finishes, he tells them plainly, "If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you." This is stop 4. Stop refusing tasks that feel beneath your status. If the actual Son of God could kneel with a towel and a basin, there is no task available to you that your own status is too important to perform. And now the 5th thing, the one that quietly undoes everything if you get it wrong. Because it looks like humility from a distance, but it's actually something else entirely. Paul writes about the mindset underneath everything Jesus did. "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant." The Greek word behind "made himself of no reputation" is keno, to empty. Christ emptied himself voluntarily of status and privilege. But notice what he didn't empty himself of, his actual identity. He didn't stop being who he was. He simply stopped clinging to the display of it. That distinction matters enormously because there's a counterfeit version of humility that looks similar on the surface, but is actually something closer to self-hatred. Constantly minimizing yourself, believing you have no worth at all, treating every compliment as a lie rather than graciously letting it land. That isn't the humility Jesus modeled. Jesus describes himself plainly, "I am gentle and lowly in heart," and immediately connects that description to rest, not shame. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Notice the difference. Jesus' humility flowed from security, not insecurity. He knew exactly who he was. The Father had given all things into his hands, and served from that place, not in spite of not knowing his own worth, but because knowing it fully meant he had nothing left to prove and nothing left to protect. This is stop 5. Stop confusing humility with hating yourself or denying your worth. Real humility doesn't come from having nothing. It comes from having everything and choosing freely not to grip it. This is where the open loop from the very beginning finally closes. Remember the picture most people start with? Someone small, self-deprecating, thinking little of themselves? That was never what Jesus modeled. He knew exactly who he was, with full authority and full identity intact, and knelt anyway. The towel didn't cost him his identity. It revealed it. Maybe you recognize a smaller, familiar version of the opposite instinct in your own life. Think about the subtle habit of complimenting someone's achievement and then, almost automatically, mentioning your own right after. "Great job on that, by the way. I did something similar last year." A moment that should have stayed entirely about them quietly gets redirected back to you without you even fully noticing you did it. That reflex is exactly what these 5 things are asking you to stop. So here is what all of this leaves you with. First, the truth of it. None of these 5 things are really about how highly or lowly you think of yourself. Grabbing the best seat, ranking yourself against others, performing for an audience, refusing what feels beneath you, and confusing humility with self-hatred. Every single one is about whether you're protecting your status or laying it down. Second, what that means for you. True humility was never low self-worth. It's a secure identity so settled that it no longer needs to be defended, promoted, or performed in front of anyone. And third, the part that should stay with you longest. Jesus washed feet, knowing exactly who he was. Full authority, full identity, fully intact. He didn't kneel because he thought less of himself. He knelt because he was completely secure in who he was and had nothing left to protect. Which of these 5 things are you still doing right now? Grabbing the seat, ranking yourself, performing for an audience, refusing what feels beneath you, or confusing humility with self-hatred? Tell me below. Because in the end, Jesus never asked you to think less of yourself. He asked you to know exactly who you are and kneel anyway.